Wednesday night to this Climate Change Symposium. My name is Joseph Barnes and I'll be moderating tonight's event. I'm a lifelong Suffield citizen, but the past few years I've been getting my degree in aquaculture and biology at the University of Rhode Island. I've been part of several research projects studying how climate change will affect and is affecting population dynamics and ecosystem services of marine organisms. In January, I decided that I wanted to take a more aggressive stance, a more public, outspoken stance on the climate crisis, and I applied to be a zero-hour ambassador. And this is when they launched their Getting to the Roots of Climate Change campaign, so I'll get into what that is in a minute. After I decided to do this, I heard about the Sunrise Movement's National Town Hall campaign, which is launched currently. The Sunrise Movement is the organization that advocates for the Green New Deal resolution. Being so intertwined and important in the environmentalism movement, I thought, why not combine the two? Why not combine 0 hours getting to the roots of climate change, kind of the problem, with Sunrise's solution with the Green New Deal? And that's exactly what this is. So I partnered 0 Hour and Sunrise with local organizations, the green teams of First Church of Christ Congregational, UCC across the street, and Second Baptist Church, Kent Memorial Library, the Connecticut Sierra Club, and the Suffield Town Hall. And I reached out to compile this excellent panel of speakers. Thank you all for being here tonight. The purpose of this Climate Change Symposium will be to inform and to educate you all on the Climate Science 101, basically what is it, why should you care, followed by several examples of how you can help. The speakers will be talking about their own activism to motivate you to become activists yourself, armed with the know-how and information to do so. So with that, I'd like to introduce the speakers, if you want to go on and just introduce yourselves.
I'm Savannah Lamas.
Jessica Put, Suffield High School.
I'm Steve Lewis. I'm with the Connecticut chapter of the Sierra Club.
I'm Carrie Eichel. I'm with the Interreligious Eco-Justice Network.
My name is Summer Wazer. I'm with the Sunrise Movement.
Tom Carr, I'm the pastor of Second Baptist Church, and with Interreligious Eco-Justice Network.
So with that, I will start. So I mentioned that I was an ambassador for 0 Hour, and that's what I'll be starting with. Can everyone see this okay? 0 Hour is a youth-led national organization advocating for sustainable policy change to combat the climate crisis. It is youth-led because they believe that people on the front lines of any movement should be the ones running it. And because people of my generation are going to be the ones growing up in this climate crisis, it makes sense that we are outspoken about it. Their movement is a movement of unstoppable youth, organizing to protect our rights and access to the natural resources and a clean, safe, and healthy environment that will ensure a livable future, where we not just survive, but flourish. So again, fighting for a livable future. As I've said this. But they believe that youth are very important in speaking out about the climate crisis because we'll be living with it the longest. 0 Hour is peaceful and nonviolent and works in solidarity with several other environmental organizations. They have several affirmations, but basically what it says is that everyone deserves a seat at the table of the climate crisis, especially those who are the most at risk of climate change-related disasters and scenarios. And I've modified this presentation a bit for this purpose. Like I said, this is the Climate Change 101. So what is it? Well, it's an amplification of the greenhouse effect. Our atmosphere naturally has gases that trap heat to allow us to live here. And when our actions produce more greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere, more than what is naturally there, it traps more and more heat and raises the global average temperature. This is a graph of atmospheric studies going back 400,000 years compiled by NASA. And you can see that CO2 emissions have never been this high in the history of our recorded data. In the last 50 years, it spiked to over 400 parts per million, which may not seem like a lot, but with that, we've already had a nearly 1 degree rise in Celsius in the global average. And again, that may not seem like a lot, but with that, we've already seen ocean acidification, ocean warming, sea level rise, and extreme weather patterns. 100-year floods are now happening every 5 years. Harmful algal blooms are more prevalent and more toxic, wildfires are more severe, and hurricanes are causing more flooding, more drastic winds, more damage. And yes, it's caused by us. This is a graph showing the black line is what we see in terms of CO2 emissions and temperature. The bluish line are natural factors, orbital changes, solar and volcanic. And that does not, that nowhere near puts our temperature where it is right now. When you combine it with our output of greenhouse gas emissions, it gets it much closer. So 0 Hour does want to put in a content advisory warning because some of these topics in the presentation are difficult. I'll just leave it at that. So this presentation is all about systems of oppression in our society and how that makes climate change worse. Those systems of oppression that I'll be talking about are colonialism, racism, patriarchy, and capitalism. Starting with colonialism. Colonialism is the policy or practice of acquiring full or partial political control over another country, occupying it with settlers and exploiting it economically. And here we see that the fossil fuel industry acts as a modern-day colonist. Developed countries produce much more tons of CO2 per person than countries that do not have access to the amenities that we have. However, we have one atmosphere and one Earth, so it affects us all. And when developed countries produce more tons of CO2 and raise the global temperature, cause these extreme weather patterns, it impacts people who don't have much of a say or an impact on CO2 emissions. So, going to the next topic, this video sums it up pretty nicely.
Who are you in the park with? I don't know the names. Where did you see the
After
lady?
the ad.
One lady.
The female jogger was severely beaten and raped. Every black male who was in the park last night is a suspect.
They said if I went along with it, that I could go home.
I want to see my son right now, right now.
I think we should have done something that we didn't do. Okay, we keep fighting.
Okay, here it is.
In America, air and water are separate but unequal. Environmental racism is the new Jim Crow. Yeah, I get it. The environment isn't a person. How can it be racist? But the most basic pieces of the environment, the air we breathe and the water we drink, are controlled and designed by people. And people can be racist. More than half of all people who live close to hazardous waste are people of color. Floodplains nationwide have high populations of blacks and Hispanics. Black children are twice as likely to suffer from lead poisoning as white children. This inequality is no accident. Pollution and the risk of disaster are a sign to black and brown communities through generations of discrimination and political neglect. Enslaved Africans were commodities partly because their work carried environmental risks that were unacceptable to whites, like exposure to heat, malaria, and mosquitoes. As Jim Crow laws created racial segregation, they also reinforced an environmental system that still disadvantages minorities. It's no wonder that black and Hispanic children have the highest rates of asthma, or that hurricanes like Katrina, Sandy, and Matthew did their worst damage in communities of color. Rich white neighborhoods can update their water lines, but not places like Clinton. The Jim Crow laws are dead and gone, but the fact that people of color are still more likely to die from environmental causes is no accident.
So that also highlights how much of a public health risk the climate crisis is. Another system that goes along with this is our prison industrial complex. America has one of the highest incarceration rates in the world, and that disproportionately affects black people. And part of this also comes down to bail. Like that video said, these communities near fossil fuel producers often live in poverty because they have no, these industries are developed near these impoverished communities because they have no say in what happens near their neighborhoods. So for the prison industrial complex, if these people are caught with a non-violent or non-harmful crime like marijuana possession, well, an affluent white person convicted of the same crime could pay the bail, but these people are incarcerated because they cannot pay their bail. And I'm not condoning murderers or rapists or people who actually deserve to be in prison. This is about people who have no voice and went to prison unjustly. The impact on prisoners in the climate crisis relates to how prisoners have no choice in the work that they do. They're often sent to clean up oil spills or clean up, fight wildfires or clean up hurricanes. And this is toxic work or harmful work that they're not trained in and are paid less than $1 to do. All right, so going into capitalism. Before I start, I want you to know that this is not 0 hour trying to start the communist revolution. When we're talking about capitalism here, we're talking about it as an economic system characterized by private or corporate ownership of capital goods. Basically, we're saying that capitalism is a system where we can put a price on everything, including our own air and water. It leads to unchecked natural resources. It's like using the earth as a credit card, only we're not making those monthly payments back. We're just spending. When we dive into this deeper, we get to the roots of corporatism and consumerism. This is the idea that we need more and more and more, and it leads to the corporations providing more and more and more, but at the cheapest cost to them. So we get things like plastic waste. We all know plastic is bad for the environment and never goes away. But 100 companies worldwide account for 71% of all greenhouse gas emissions. Over 50% of those are attributed to 25 companies. And for the fashion industry, that accounts for 20% of all of our wastewater worldwide. So when we talk about capitalism in this instance, we're really talking about the culture of extraction. And patriarchy. This is the oldest system of oppression that we're talking about of these four. And it's a social organization marked by the supremacy of the father in the clan or family. So in some cultures where patriarchy is much more prevalent, we see that women are more affected as weather patterns worsen, as the heat increases, as droughts increase. Women women make up 80% of the people displaced by climate change. And that's because in some cultures, women are the ones who do the farming, who take care of the families, who walk miles to get the water. And when your crops aren't growing, and when there's no water, you have to walk even farther in oppressive heat. So it's not good. And that brings us into industrial animal agriculture. Industrial animal agriculture accounts for 14.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. For one sector, that is a huge amount. And making room for all of these animals or crop distributions, remember, we have to feed almost 8 billion people. We didn't have to feed 8 billion people 50 years ago. So when we make room for these expansive projects or farms, it cuts down forests, it releases deforestation, which then rapidly releases CO2. Instead of having that carbon sink with trees, you now just have an open space that releases CO2 through methane production of the animals or whatever goes into the farm. And how climate change affects disabled people. Well, people with a compromised immune system, including children or the elderly and disabled people, are going to be more sensitive to more pollutants in the air, in the atmosphere. They're going to be more sensitive to the rising temperatures. And that instills a sense of ableism in our societies. It may not be conscious, but we tend to favor people who are more able-bodied. Disabled people in things like hurricanes, floods, wildfires, they're going to have a much more difficult time evacuating. And these weather patterns, these natural disasters are only going to get worse. So, that was heavy, but now we can get into what we can do to change. Zero Hour recommends some structural changes, such as local schools implementing climate justice education. That may seem pretty obvious, but there's actually a bill going around in Connecticut right now to mandate public schools to teach climate education, climate change, climate justice. If that bill passes, Connecticut will be the first state in America to have a law like that. Nowhere else in America is climate change it's only willingly being taught if the teachers have it in their curriculum. Local community farming, that means shopping local, getting food available in your area when it's ready in its appropriate season. That decreases emissions from transportation, refrigeration, and land use. Sustainable autonomous housing. That basically means off the energy grid. Self-functioning houses. Basically it comes down to renewables, solar energy grids, wind turbines, geothermal heating and energy. And of course, urge your local elected officials to create affordable mass transit systems. If you've ever taken public transit, you know it's not the most efficient. I personally have had a bus just pass me while I'm sitting there, so I had to wait another 20 minutes. That was fun. It doesn't get you exactly where you need to go either. And if public transit is more accessible and more efficient, and more people can take it, it's cheaper and reduces carbon emissions from everyone driving. We also call for a just transition away from fossil fuels to completely sustainable energy, which takes into consideration the need for fossil fuel employees to remain employed. So the key word there is the just transition. And again, the whole purpose of this presentation is to recognize the systems of oppression and demand the livable earth that we all deserve. It's uncomfortable hearing about this, it's uncomfortable talking about this, but the more we get it out in the open, not the more comfortable it'll be, but the more we'll be able to talk about it and right these injustices, and get people who need their voices heard. So what can you do? Zero Hour has a people's platform. It lays out their guidelines very well. It's on that table over there. Get your school board to pass a climate resolution. Divest your money from national banks to credit unions. National banks are companies, they need to make a profit. Oftentimes they are invested in the fossil fuel industry. The Interreligious Eco Justice Network actually had a seminar on how to do that, and it's proven that the green energy sector is much more profitable and much more quickly growing than the fossil fuel industry. Reduce meat consumption from industrial producers, because again, that's a huge source of carbon emissions. Do your best to support businesses that have divested from fossil fuels. This is the basics of a free market. You support the company that aligns with your beliefs, they get the profit, and other companies will follow suit. Support elected officials who believe in climate justice, and urge your local officials to take the no fossil fuel money pledge. That means you're not taking money during your campaign from the fossil fuel industry. And you can start or join a local Zero Hour chapter of your own. I am not the Zero Hour chapter in Southfield. I'm just an ambassador. There is no Zero Hour chapter. It's not one of the high schools, or any school, so feel free to start one. And you can find out more about Zero Hour on all social media at thisiszerohour.org, or email them at info@thisiszerohour.org. So this has been their presentation for the Getting to the Roots of Climate Change campaign. I do want to hold any questions until the end. There were some last minute updates, so if we have time at the end, we can open it up to questions. I also forgot to mention a few things. There are bathrooms in the hallway just outside, and a water fountain. Because it's updates, there won't be a break, so if you need to get up at any point, you can go check out the table over there, go get a drink, walk around. No one will think anything of that. And on this table over here, many of our speakers and sponsors brought several things for you to look at, for you to take. It's really cool stuff I want to look at afterwards. I've also put the Zero Hour People's platform over there, a statement from Central's first selectman, Melissa Mack, which I'll be reading later, and a copy of the Green New Deal resolution. So, next up is Savannah Longs.
previously introduced by Savannah, I'm not here for any particular organization. I'm just here, I guess, for people my age who have grown up learning about the climate crisis. From a very young age, I understood how precious this planet was. I was thankful for the ocean I could cool off in, the trees I was able to climb, and the utter beauty that the natural world had to offer. That beauty is now fading as the harsh reality of climate change starts to take effect. Our planet is not dying. Our planet is being murdered. We are all too aware of our own impact in this predetermined death. We know exactly what is happening, and yet we are doing nothing. We have watched as our politicians and other people in power have denied the glaring evidence of peer-reviewed scientific reports. Despite the many bystanders, the youth are fighting hard against the climate crisis. What this generation has to fight is a battle that no other generation has ever had to face, because we are fighting for our future. By burning hydrocarbon fuels, also known as fossil fuels, humans have altered the previous surface temperature of the Earth by releasing excess carbon dioxide, as well as other emissions, such as man-made chlorofluorocarbons, into the atmosphere. These gases trap heat and therefore cause a warming commonly called the greenhouse effect. Today, Earth's surface temperature is about 1.62 degrees higher than it was in the late 19th century. The oceans have also absorbed large amounts of carbon dioxide, causing the top 700 meters, which is about 2,300 feet, of the ocean to warm more than 0.4 degrees Fahrenheit since 1969. This increase, although seemingly small, has delayed beluga whale migration patterns. Our warming planet is also losing its polar ice caps. Data from NASA's Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment show Greenland has lost an average of 286 billion tons of ice per year between 1993 and 2016, while Antarctica lost about 127 billion tons of ice per year during the same period. This loss of ice is contributing to the sea level rise and is causing the starvation of species like polar bears who once used the ice to hunt on. The biodiversity of this planet is being butchered by our negative environmental impact. We are currently experiencing a mass extinction, the largest one yet. But unlike the ones in the past caused by volcanic eruptions, asteroids, and natural climate shifts, humans are driving this ongoing extinction. In fact, 99% of currently threatened species are at risk from human activities, primarily those driving habitat loss, introduction of exotic species, and global warming. Noted conservation scientist David Wilkoff estimates that there are between 14,000 and 35,000 endangered species in the United States, which is 17 to 18% of the total flora and fauna of the United States. Because of human impact, we risk losing all of our insects completely in less than 100 years. Because of these rising temperatures, larvae are dying at a young stage. They are being wiped out by pesticides used for crops or homeowners wanting to show off their lawns. Insects provide nutrition for various bird species, bats, rodents, and amphibians. Losing them could cause an entire trophic cascade and eradicate the lives of many different species. Our biodiversity is so extremely important that we cannot even put a monetary value on it. We use rainforests to promote ecotourism. We benefit from plants like hemp, which take out large amounts of carbon dioxide per acre, more than most plants, and can be composted. We should be working together in unison to reconstruct our planet. Sustainable practices such as using biodiversity to our advantage can help rebuild our economy as well as decrease the negative effects of climate change. The ocean has become more acidic. The sea levels are rising. We are losing snow cover. There has been an increase in extreme weather events. We have overfished, we have deforested, and there's a garbage patch in the Pacific Ocean that's three times the size of France. Animals and plants have become extinct. We have depleted our ozone and overused our land for agriculture. We have polluted our water bodies with excess nitrogen and killed off fish populations by oxygen depletion. What more evidence do people need in order to change? Humans are destroying what is left of this planet with no remorse and no plan to stop. Did you know that what you throw into your recycling bin most of the time doesn't even get recycled? Countries like the United States have been sending their waste to developing countries that cannot keep up with the demand, as they have their own waste to be removed, and in turn, their land and drinking water becomes polluted, keeping them impoverished. In the United States, it is far cheaper to send everything overseas or to the landfill, and thus the plastic ends up in the stomachs of fish or suffocating a sea turtle. In fact, 100,000 marine mammals and turtles and 1 million seabirds are killed by marine plastic pollution annually. Approximately 51 trillion microscopic pieces of plastic weighing 269,000 tons are in the ocean. For numbers, that is approximately 1,345 adult blue whales. Scientists have even discovered microplastics embedded deep in the Arctic ice. The planet is out of its comfort zone, and we should be too. Much of my life has already been dedicated to fighting climate change and literally fighting for my right to live in the future. I have attended marches and rallies, but marching and rallying won't stop climate change itself. If I want to change, I have to change my life too. So I have. The planet is out of its comfort zone, and we should be too. So stop using single plastics such as straws and forks. Bring your own Tupperware if you know you have leftovers. Ditch the plastic bags at the grocery store and bring your own. Try to limit your meat, fish, and dairy consumption, since agriculture is the #1 cause of water loss and deforestation. And if you really want to limit your plastic, make your own toiletries from recipes online. Buying used clothes is also beneficial to the environment because it reduces waste and water loss. Bamboo toothbrushes are also a good investment as they last longer than plastic ones and are biodegradable. Using water bottles and thermoses can also reduce waste. There are literally environmentally friendly products for everything. I can't stress how important it is to know that companies have the control. Companies will stop supplying products if no one is willing to buy them, so shop sustainable and start making a difference. I'm nervous for that the rest of my life. I will be worried about finding clean water, making sure I have enough food, finding shelter from extreme weather events, and possibly even fighting mass disease outbreaks. The United Nations has given us 12 years to reverse our actions, or we will inevitably fight for resources until death. I'm begging politicians to open their eyes to the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal was created by the Green New Deal Task Force as a plan for 100% clean renewable energy by 2030, utilizing a carbon tax, guaranteeing jobs, free college, single-pay health care, and a focus on public programs. With proposals such as this, we would be able to make a social adjustment and avoid the loss of our entire species. No generation has ever had to worry about surviving for their own future, but unfortunately, this generation faces this fear every day. I hope by coming here, you can learn and understand the severity of these issues and actively join the fight for climate justice. It is not the time to be a bystander. Spread awareness, change your life, and save our home. Thanks.
Former student of mine right here.
Excuse me, could I ask a question? I know this is not appropriate, but is it appropriate?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So does anyone here doubt climate change? Okay, so you're talking to the convert. Secondly, you're conflating so many things. I don't know how you can articulate an effective political campaign to affect people. You know, when I think about why did so many people vote for Trump, it was because they felt they were left out of the prosperity of the capitalist system, so they could own 2 cars and a boat and a motorcycle. And believe me, I'm a cyclist, so I notice this every day. Bigger and bigger cars, bigger and bigger boats. You've got to resort this whole argument in terms of an existential threat that affects the well-being of individual people. And pollution of their lives seems to be, to me, one of the more effective arguments. To question capitalism is a joke. They're not going to buy that. I mean, I'm just saying, I just think you need to...
I think there's probably a more appropriate time to have your comments.
Sorry about that. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Very good. Continue with your stuff.
No,
Yeah.
thank you for your points. Actually, that is a huge problem, that there is so much to the climate crisis, and I think Savannah had a lot of that, so that was really good.
It's kind of just
Yeah, so I teach environmental science at Suffield High School. A couple of my students are here. I hear what you're talking about. I recently went to Antarctica, and that's kind of what I felt like I could bring to the table, was to talk to you guys about what it's like in Antarctica, and to actually provide a little light on that subject. So I'm going to go ahead with that, and then maybe we'll get back to the points that you raised towards the end. You bring up good, valid points, but I think, yeah. Okay, so first of all, actually, let me go back to that first slide. So when you think about Antarctica in your head, it is exactly what you think about. It's a weird, wild place. Gigantic alabaster walls of ice that are crumbling constantly. This ephemeral, sort of, I guess some people would call it a wasteland, that is so full of life, it's hard to imagine. While my ship, the 400-foot National Geographic Explorer, was going through this place, I mean, there were humpback whales going by us in massive amounts. We had endemic species of killer whales around us. It's hard to imagine the bounty of life that's there. In my former career, I was a wildlife biologist. I started out my life working out as an endangered species surveyor out in Forks, Washington, and San Diego, and New Mexico. I have an undergraduate degree in environmental science and a master's degree in environmental science, and this is kind of my lifeblood. I feel like this is the reason I was put on Earth, was to talk about climate change, to talk about issues affecting the environment. And so when Joe talked to me about how he was putting this on, to talk about it, and that there was a youth movement actually happening in America to talk about climate change, to bring these issues up, that there was an empowered base coming from the bottom, I was like, oh my God, take the monkey off my back. You know, like, this has been kind of the provenance of adults for a long time, and now there's an empowered and impassioned and emboldened youth that are coming out. And so sometimes there's a little hyperbole in there, but I think the action, the energy that's coming out of this movement is inspiring, and I'm really happy to be a part of it. So I'm going to add my 2 cents to this whole mix. I'll probably talk longer than I should, because I kind of always do that. But let me tell you about Antarctica. I'm going to walk in right in the middle of this. Okay, so first of all, how did I get to Antarctica? Well, I was selected as a 2018 Grosvenor Teacher Fellow by National Geographic. So if we go back to Gil Grosvenor's 70th birthday, Gil Grosvenor was the president and chairman of National Geographic, and his father was before him. And so on his 70th birthday, he decided to step down, and when he stepped down, he had a big party for him, because it was also his 70th birthday. His best friend was a guy named Sven Lindblad, and Sven Lindblad runs the premier adventure travel company on planet Earth. And he said, listen, for your birthday, and based on your commitment to education, I'm going to set aside one cabin in one of my ships perpetually for educators to go out and check out the world, to go to places they could never afford to go to see things that they could never afford to see, so they can bring that stuff back to their classrooms. And so fast forward to now, it went from that one cabin to 40 fellows being chosen from the United States, Canada, and the Virgin Islands, and 45 fellows chosen this year. And so I got sent to Antarctica, because that